Well, welcome officially to the webinar. I'm Jason Jones, Service Line Leader of Cresa Remote Advisory Services, and I'm joined today by Steve Ike, Senior Vice President at Cresa. Welcome to the webinar. When the healthcare crisis forced shelter-in-place and stay-at-home orders in mid-March 2020, no one could have known that an entirely new era in how and where organizations work and collaborate began. Here's what a few CEOs have had to say along the way. On the positive side, one CEO said, "We're going to be the most forward-leaning company on remote work at our scale." That was Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. Another CEO said, "Remote work will change how we manage our real estate. We will quickly move to more open seating arrangement in which digital tools will help manage seating arrangements." That was Jamie Dimon, the chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, in his annual letter to shareholders just last week. Now, what's interesting is, in the very same letter, in fact, the very next paragraph, Jamie points out serious weaknesses of the virtual world. He says, performing jobs remotely does not work as well when people don't know one another. He also said most professionals learn their job through the apprenticeship model, which is almost impossible to replicate in the Zoom world. And finally, remote work virtually eliminates spontaneous learning and creativity. And then, at the complete extreme other end of the spectrum, one CEO went so far as to say, "I don't see any positives. Not being able to get together in person, particularly internationally, is a pure negative." That was Reed Hastings, the co-CEO of Netflix. So we have CEO opinions on both sides of the issue. But what do employees think? As time has passed and employees and their managers have settled into a new way of working, the cultural acceptance of remote work has solidified. So much so that most surveys today show that anywhere from 50% up to 80% of all office-based knowledge workers, people who use a computer most of the day, want the flexibility to work from home part-time, typically 2 or 3 days a week. But this brings new challenges and a new CEO quote. Sid Sijbrandij is the CEO of GitLab, which is an open source software firm that has never had an office since its start in 2014. It is a 100% remote company and has grown to 1,300 employees in 66 countries. When asked about the blend of working remotely and working in the office, Sid said, "If you try to do hybrid, you will have an A team and a B team, those in the office and those deprived of information and career opportunities." He also warned, two ways of working is very, very hard, and companies should not do it lightly. It's okay to say, back to the office, or all remote, but hybrid can turn out really bad. Now, I want us to pause for a moment to really ponder what Sid said about this binary choice between either remote only or office only. Sid suggests this choice because, according to him, hybrid can turn out really bad. But we have to remember, the new reality is that approximately 70% of office-based workers want a part-time combination of working from home and the office. And the remaining 30% are split evenly between wanting full-time remote and full-time office, which means if you only offer one or the other, you'll limit yourself to attracting only 15% of your potential workforce. 85% of the workforce may look elsewhere. This is why we believe that organizations are going to figure out the hybrid approach, offering some combination of working in the office and working from home, whether full-time or part-time. But what is the right blend for your organization? What are the criteria for a successful strategy to make sure you're not missing anything? And how do you ensure you're headed down the right path? To answer these questions, you need a plan. You need a plan to blend remote and office. Because right now, everyone has a remote plan of some sort. But for many, it's a short-term response to the health crisis that does not involve blending remote with the office. And that's the rub. That's the challenge. But it's also an opportunity. So if you're contemplating a hybrid work arrangement that allows employees to work at the office and at home, and if you're interested in answering questions such as, well, what questions should we be asking? And is there a framework to evaluate a hybrid workforce strategy? And what is the roadmap to navigate to the right blend of remote and office? Then this webinar is for you. As I mentioned, I'm Jason Jones, and I'm joined by my colleague, Steve Ike. I've been at Cresa for 18 years, originally as a real estate advisor, but now exclusively leading two of our service lines, Cresa Technology Advisory Services and Remote Advisory Services. Steve has over 25 years of experience providing workforce strategy expertise to companies like General Electric, Macy's, Procter & Gamble, and Kimberly-Clark, to name a few. Today we'll have a 45-minute presentation with some Q&A at the end, and we'll record the webinar and send a copy afterwards. Please ask questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And this is really important, make comments also. Just a thought or an opinion that you'd like to share. Go ahead, type it in there, and we'll get to them during the Q&A period. We'd love to hear from you. So today, we're going to address context for where we are in the timeline of the COVID-19 experience from a work perspective, benefits and challenges of a hybrid workforce strategy, its key elements, and a roadmap to build a sustainable strategy. So we start with the context for where we are in the timeline of COVID-19. There are three phases of this experience. The first was the immediate phase. People were forced to vacate their offices and work from home. Phase two is the endure phase. We've been enduring, leveraging technology, modifying workflows, and working to maintain culture. All things considered, it's gone pretty well. Phase three will be the sustain and compete phase. This is the post-COVID phase. Organizations will work to sustain a new way of working that leverages what they learned about remote work while recapturing all of the benefits of a shared central office. But to get from phase two to phase three, we have to go through a transition. And that is where we are right now. Or should I say that's where we should be right now. Forward-thinking leaders are there, taking advantage of this time to invest and prepare for the future because they know that transition is key. But while forward-thinking leaders are actively engaged in transition planning, near-term thinkers are not. And the danger for them is to be caught flat-footed when the health restrictions lift and they have unimpeded access to their office. That's when they will be forced to make decisions about who works where and when, or at an even higher level, decide who among their employees will make that decision. They'll also need to be able to support their workforce that's moving fluidly from home to office by using technology, human resource policies, and work processes. It's going to be a real challenge, and we don't want to see leaders rushed to approve plans and make decisions that they're not prepared for. But the question of how do we transition is actually premature. First, we have to ask, what exactly are we transitioning to? And why do we want to get there? What are its benefits? And then finally, what are the inherent challenges? Then let's talk about how to get there. Now, for the first three questions today, we'll provide a framework for thinking about the workforce and the workplace in a new light. For the transition question, we'll describe a roadmap to help guide you. But to start, we have to ask a seminal question. Now, this is the question that forward-thinking organizations have already been asking themselves. And it's a question that we suggest you too ask yourself. And that question is, what is the right hybrid workforce strategy specific to us that will minimize expenses and the threat to business continuity, but also maximize productivity, talent attraction and retention, and financial results? So it is these key business drivers that inform our answer to that question of what exactly are we transitioning to? Well, the answer is we want to transition to workforce strategies that achieve these goals. And in order to evaluate those workforce strategies, we have to start by understanding their benefits and challenges. So let's take a look. The benefits of a hybrid workforce strategy combine the best of remote work and the best of the shared office. Now, at the top of the list for remote work is the reduced commute and fewer interruptions. These two factors alone increase the annual productivity of each half-time remote worker, 2.5 days per week, by 16 business days per year, which equates to $6,400 per employee per year. In addition, remote work reduces the expense of real estate, employee turnover, and absenteeism, and reduce personal costs for employees, average about $4,000 per year by saving on commute, clothes, and food. There are environmental benefits of reduced carbon emissions, and employees consistently state their work-life balance is better. Now, on the other hand, the benefits of the office are time-proven and have really crystallized during the pandemic. Highlights include in-person collaboration and ideation, team building, socialization, mentoring and training, complex problem solving, serendipitous moments, and ad hoc meetings. You know, leaning over to your neighbor and saying, hey, you got a minute? Now, one benefit of both remote work and the shared office is the ability to recruit and retain talent. With 70% of employees wanting a hybrid workforce experience, most organizations will have to offer some degree of flexibility between home and office in order to recruit and retain the best and the brightest. Another key benefit of both remote work and the office is that together, and only together, they meet one of the key workforce desires that has been ignited by the remote work experience. This desire is so powerful that it is shaping workforce strategy around the globe and subsequently workspace design and real estate strategy. And that key desire is freedom. The freedom to choose. First, the freedom to choose when work is done. Employees want to work at any time of day while blending in personal tasks or recreation. They no longer want to be held to the rigid 9-to-5 industrial age concept of punching the clock. The sentiment is, measure my output, not my input, and give me the freedom to decide how I schedule my day and how I get my work done. Now, some are even asking for a more flexible schedule, perhaps even a 4-day work week. And second, there's a very strong desire to choose where work is done. First, there's the simple geography of choosing among home, office, or other locations. But also, employees want to choose among different environments inside of the shared central office that are built for specific purposes. Examples include areas designed for focus work, other areas for teamwork, and others for socialization, training, coffee bars, video conferencing rooms, etc. Employees want options and variety, and ultimately the freedom to choose which location they determine is best to accomplish their work. Satisfying this desire for the freedom brings many benefits, the first of which is employee satisfaction. And greater employee satisfaction leads to greater engagement. Greater engagement leads to lower turnover and a whole host of other benefits. Less absenteeism, better customer engagement, which we know leads to lower customer churn, which in turn yields a higher customer lifetime value and higher profits. Now, you may be wondering, what is the asterisk for? These are the things that are quantifiable. You can measure them. And if they go up, then your hybrid workforce strategy is working. But if they go down, then you may be suffering from some of the special challenges that a hybrid workforce brings. And individually, the challenges of remote work and the shared office have been experienced by us all. But what has not yet been experienced on a broad scale are the challenges associated with the hybrid workforce model. And that blends remote with the office. So we're going to highlight 3 challenging scenarios that organizations could be faced with in a post-COVID hybrid workforce environment. The first challenge is the potential for disparity between teams. Let's take Team A. Team A has a manager who embraces a hybrid workforce. She's on board with the concept of giving you the freedom to choose where and when you feel you can be the most productive. Periodically, she requires in-person meetings, but they are purposeful and well-run. She focuses on the output of your efforts, not the input of your time. Team members feel a strong spirit of freedom working for her. Then there's Team B. Team B has a manager who doubts the long-term effectiveness of a hybrid workforce. He's uncomfortable managing people he cannot see and requires in-office presence, although he does allow remote work one day of the week. When Team B looks at Team A, they feel constrained. So what is the outcome? Team B feels jealous and dispirited. They wonder, can I switch teams? Or worse, should I leave my job? If you're the VP overseeing these teams, what do you do? Another potential challenge is internal division within a hybrid team. In this scenario, we have in-office team members who are either full-time in the office or majority in the office. And then we have remote team members who are full-time remote or majority remote. If the boss spends most of her time in the office, then in-office team members have proximity to her that remote members do not. This proximity may lead to real or perceived better career opportunities, choice assignments, promotions, etc., and better access to information. This is what Sid Sibrandy was talking about. What's the upshot of this scenario? Remote team members feel undervalued and dispirited. Teamwork is reduced, and they may wonder, can I switch teams? Or worse, should I leave this organization? Again, if you're the VP overseeing this team, what do you do? How do you prevent this scenario? And yet another challenge of a hybrid workforce regards how to accommodate multiple employee profiles. And by profiles, we mean how and when an employee chooses to work. For example, profile number one are employees who choose to work 3 days in the office and 2 days at home, or perhaps 2 days in the office and 3 days at home. Profile number two are in the office 100% of the time, but only work 4 days a week. And then profile three's default is, well, their default location is at home, but they attend periodic in-person team meetings and occasionally choose to drop in the office to work or socialize. The challenge is, how do you accommodate all of these profiles? What are the critical requirements to support them? Now, this is key. This next slide is really key to awareness of what it takes to support a hybrid workforce. What should organizations do from the perspective of human resource policy, measuring performance, ongoing training, establishing cultural norms, technology, cybersecurity, and developing a real estate strategy that will support each of these profiles at the same time? Should you even allow all of these profiles? Which brings us to an audience participation question. We want to pause for just a moment to ask a question of you, and that is, what are your top 2 concerns with a hybrid workforce, or that you have heard perhaps your clients, if you're a professional service provider, express their concerns about a hybrid workforce environment? Meaning, when you have unimpeded access to your central office and some portion of the employees continue to work part-time, what concerns you about that arrangement? And here are some examples on the screen. Fairness for evaluations and promotions, we just discussed. Morale and culture, redesigning office space, unexpected costs, cybersecurity, collaboration, mentoring, and the list goes on. This is just a representative examples. Please type your thoughts into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and as importantly, help us all with the second question, which is, how is your organization addressing the concerns? Or again, how have you seen other organizations addressing these concerns? Now, it may be that you're not addressing these just yet. That's part of why you're here on the webinar today. But some of you may have already been preparing for some of these issues, and you could have great ideas that we'd all benefit from. We'd love to hear from you. Please share. Because we feel that these issues showcase the need for organizations to invest time right now preparing for the future, brainstorming scenarios and possible solutions, building consensus among leaders, casting a vision among employees, and ultimately creating a hybrid workforce strategy that maximizes the opportunity to blend remote with the shared office. So we'd appreciate hearing from you and some of your ideas. Now, in our opinion, to create a successful strategy, you need a framework for developing the strategy. Interestingly, the framework to develop a successful workforce strategy can be built upon the same framework used to build a successful workplace strategy. The framework consists of 4 key elements, and we call it Workplace 2.0. This is the first of 2 key frameworks to help you evaluate and think about hybrid workforce strategy. The first element is talent. A workplace is created to attract and retain the best and the brightest. A workplace should also foster an organization's culture and leverage technology to drive productivity. And finally, there's the physical space itself. Before the pandemic, it was only the shared central office that was utilized for employee engagement, productivity, and satisfaction. But what's new and exciting is the concept of space being not only about the design and location of a shared office, but also offering the freedom to choose the best location, which drives employee engagement, productivity, and satisfaction. You see, Workplace 2.0 will be different for each organization, each department, even each team member and individual. There's no one right answer. But the good news is that you can use the key elements of the Workplace 2.0 paradigm to navigate to the right hybrid workforce strategy for your organization. So let's take a look one at a time. The first is talent. You have to determine which job roles are appropriate for remote work and which job functions might be modified to better facilitate virtual processes and virtual collaboration. Next, you have to determine who has the personal aptitude for remote work. Not everyone who's in a job suitable for remote is a good fit for remote. Personal assessments can help, especially when coupled with training, which leads to training for managers and employees. And this is a key aspect. Managers might benefit from training to better manage a team that at any given time includes some people working at home and some people at work at the same time, managing meetings in that way. And in addition, the technology that enables remote work is constantly changing. Many employees simply don't know how to use the full suite of the technology that they already have right at their fingertips. Training can help. And finally, eligibility requirements, set expectations, and provide structure. Companies can use key performance indicators and performance evaluations to establish and maintain eligibility. Culture is the second key element, with trust being the first key component. Organizations must build trust both up and down the chain of command. And most important is to be consistent and follow through. People are trusted when they consistently demonstrate that they do what they say they're going to do. It's hard to trust someone who may not yet trust you. Therefore, it's incumbent upon leaders to take the initiative and trust their employees first. Communication. Good communication, both formal and informal, is critical to keep employees motivated. And in hybrid environments, it needs to be high quality and high frequency. In addition, leaders must find ways to communicate bigger picture mission and goals so that the remote employees can be informed and empowered to make unsupervised, independent decisions. Cultural norms. Part of any culture is establishing group norms, whether spoken or unspoken. And a best practice for a hybrid workforce is for teams to discuss and agree upon a short list of norms to guide team behavior and build comfort. Examples include setting certain days of the week as no camera days, or set a default time frame for meetings that's short, 15 minutes. Commit to not using the chat feature during video meetings to avoid distractions, and commit to turning on everyone's individual camera during an in-person meeting so that team members who are working remotely that day don't feel marginalized or left out. And that speaks to value and job security. Because those who are out of sight, who work remotely all or most of the time, they need to feel like valuable members of the team who are secure in their jobs, not at a disadvantage with coworkers who spend more time at the office. And finally, there's socialization. Efforts to maintain relational bonds are even more important in a hybrid environment. On the left are just a few ideas to build and maintain relationships among hybrid team members that can be done remotely. Now, the next key element of a hybrid workforce strategy is the technology that enables remote work. And for the technology element, I want to introduce my colleague, Steve Ike. So as I mentioned earlier, Steve has over 25 years of experience providing workforce strategy consulting and to companies like General Electric, Macy's, Procter & Gamble, Kimberly-Clark, et cetera. And Steve, I hand it over to you.
Well, Jason, and thank you so much. And I want to just put a plug in also. If there are any questions or any thoughts or comments, please do make those and allow for a great wrap-up dialogue towards the end of our time today. So as we dive into technology, first, to set the stage, it's really more than platforms and tools. Technology is an enabler and a resource that can be leveraged to create that on-demand work experience. As we look at how, when, and where people work together, whether they're remote or in the office, a combination of communication and collaboration platforms are really the foundation for that purposeful interaction. Whether it be through real-time synchronous, like voice, video, instant messaging, and chat, or near real-time asynchronous communications using tools that we've used today of Teams and Google Meet or Slack and email. It's about providing that anytime, anywhere, one number reach access. And when combined with a shared workspace where we meet and collaborate and share work, driving that true team-based communications platform. And next, with performance management. That addresses the area of elevating productivity over activity. And we focus on those three core areas that have been discussed: building trust, empowering employees, and driving the productivity. And it addresses that key concern that folks have had in the past of, if I can't see them, I can't manage them. Well, we flip that over to, if I can't measure, or if I can measure, I can manage. And making that shift from measuring tasks and activities into measuring business goals, setting the stage. Performance management is a process and a set of tools that organizations use to measure and evaluate corporate performance and employee performance, and helping those managers and employees have meaningful conversations when both are provided to real-time access to information viewed in a visual dashboard. And in turn, this helps address that issue that Jason brought up, is that tension of in the office or remote office. And then we provide consistent and measurable productivity and the progress towards the goals, and then driving business outcomes. As we look into document management, you'll see on the screen where we mention Box and Dropbox and Google Drive. Those are tools, but document management goes even farther. It's an online storage and library using those tools, but we combine that with a management tool and interface to where we manage content. We address security. Who owns that document? What version is that document? And how do we manage distribution of documents and files across an organization? Let's think about facilitating real-time and anytime access, where we address workflow, we address process control and document control for things like loan process in a financial services industry, claims management in an insurance industry, or even professional services firms where we deal with case files and client matters. To summarize, document management provides process, workflows, and document control, simplifying and streamlining all of the information that comes, whether it's a Word document, a file, a client record, or a tool that's in there. And finally, with cybersecurity and compliance, it's even more important today as ever before, because with more people working at home on more connected devices, we need to be able to control access to critical and secure information. We need to be able to ensure that the information is separate and segregated from other devices in the home. And think about how many devices and how many people are connected at home today. How do we logically segment that work information from non-work activities, non-work items, and non-work devices? And it falls into the technical aspects of logical and physical separation of the wireless network, or secure connectivity over a private network back to the corporate office, or measuring and managing intrusion detection, both at the access in from your carrier and at your device. But I mentioned earlier overlooked items. Those often fall into the human factors. Those can be compliance around credit card information, healthcare informational, personally identifiable information, and anything that is related to protecting that data. It can fit into physical. In my office, because I do have critical information, I've got a door that can lock. I've got a laptop that's secure, and it actually, if it doesn't track activity or I'm logged off for a certain time, it shuts down the laptop. The other that you need to consider is in a shared work environment at home, that if you're dealing with secure and proprietary information, what are the ears that can hear, or the eyes that can see, and really locking that down and protecting that information. So as we look at communications, performance, management of information, and compliance, it all fits into some subcategories within addressing technology for that virtualized remote work experience. Thank you, Jason.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much, Steve. And we'll move on. Let me reset this. So that was the fourth element. And finally, there's the physical space itself. Now, to accommodate employees' desire for this freedom of choice in where and when they work, organizations must view the workplace no longer as that single shared location, but instead accommodate a network of flexible, convenient, and on-demand places. Employees want a location where they feel that they will be most productive for that day, or even just part of the day. And when they are in the office, they want a similar choice among spaces. They want to be able to choose among different environments within the office where they feel they'll be the most effective for that specific task. And those environments and tasks will change throughout the day. We feel there's three general categories of space will be important to a hybrid workforce, and these are the categories for you to keep in mind as you're thinking about your space and designing for the future. And this is just very, very simple, but in sort of filtering it all down, there's private collaboration space. This is where you'll work in person with others, but will be secluded from the activity and other employees in the office. So that's a room where you can close the door. Second would be private individual space. This is where you work by yourself, isolated from others. And the third is what we call open air space, which is a catch-all for any space where you can see and be seen by others. And this is generally more socially oriented space, which allows for the ad hoc conversations and serendipity that many companies are missing and looking for, although you may focus well in these parts of the office. Now, for the home office, as a best practice, we recommend offering employees reimbursement or a stipend for home office furniture and IT equipment, which can be spent on any items the employee desires, with the exception of the laptop and the docking station, which really need to be standardized for the sake of IT efficiency. Otherwise, offer maximum freedom of choice. But at the same time, recommend that you offer the option to purchase from a more limited, sort of curated selection of recommended furniture and technology. And this ability to choose supports the desire for freedom, while at the same time providing a helpful reduction from what could be an overwhelming number of options. So that's the 4 key elements, but we have a bonus key element, and that is policy. We felt that a clear corporate policy is so important to the success of a hybrid workforce strategy that we included it as the 5th element. A clear policy is crucial to setting expectations. And as a leader, if you don't set expectations, your employees will set their own, and they will likely be different from yours. Hybrid workforce policies should address eligibility requirements, tools and resources that the company will provide for home use, what the employee is expected to provide, and expectations for personal performance and participation, as well as what constitutes disqualification. So we've discussed the key elements and some guidance on how to employ them, but we also feel it's important to show that many of these subjective elements are actually quantifiable. This is a real example of a company we worked with that had 500 employees and was interested in moving a portion remote. They ended up moving 50 employees to full-time and 60 to part-time, about 2 days a week. Real estate costs were reduced by $337,000. This was calculated using 150 square feet per person times $30 a square foot. Productivity increased 20%, which produced labor savings of $500,000 per year since they didn't have to hire as many employees. Employee turnover was reduced by 50%, which avoided hiring and training costs of $26,400 per year, and they reduced employee absenteeism by 40%, which saved $72,000 per year. In addition, employee personal savings were estimated to be $4,000 per year due to reduced commuting costs, parking, food, and clothing. Now that you've learned the key elements of the Workplace 2.0 paradigm, you might be asking, okay, but what's the process for getting there? Where's the best place to start? So we want to introduce to you our second key framework of the webinar for developing a hybrid workforce strategy. And we believe that all successful organizations start with leadership and culture. They are the umbrella which overhangs all success. Then, the fundamental business goals of operational productivity, recruiting and retaining talent, and maximizing financial results should inform all decisions and drive behavior. To achieve these business goals, we must follow a sequential path, starting with workforce strategy, followed by workplace strategy and design, and then real estate strategy. Here it is again. Step 1 drives step 2, which leads naturally to step 3. And when workforce strategy is addressed first, it gives you the freedom to design your workplace with the confidence that you're basing the design and the real estate strategy on meaningful information, but also that your real estate strategy won't have to adapt to an ever-changing workforce strategy sometime down the road. You want to build your real estate strategy and the workplace strategy and design on solid rock, not shifting sand. So knowing this, it's important to begin by examining the critical requirements of a hybrid workforce strategy, being mindful that you will now be supporting workers who are at home one day and in the office another day, or different parts of the day. And we believe this is a key differentiator for Cresa as a real estate advisory firm. We don't know of anyone else who starts their real estate strategy by evaluating the critical requirements of a broader workforce strategy first. So on the screen is the checklist that every organization should work through. We'll send an email with this list to all attendees, so no need to jot down every bullet point right now. But if you'd like to have a conversation about your specific situation, please contact Steve or myself or the Cresa advisor who invited you to this webinar. We enjoy those open dialogues and sharing what we see other organizations doing. Now, the final question, the one from the very beginning of the webinar, is how do we transition? How should we evaluate all of those critical requirements to develop a successful and sustainable hybrid workforce strategy? Cresa has developed a roadmap that consists of 5 steps to methodically walk you through the process, and it begins with awareness. Learn best practices, understand the benefits and the challenges, become aware of the process, and you're doing that today. Now, the next 3 steps, Cresa has combined into a workshop that's built on 3 phases. Phase 1 is discovery, that begins with a kickoff meeting where you build your team and establish goals. And then we conduct surveys and interviews to evaluate your organization in light of the critical requirements. Phase 2 is analysis. Here, we identify any gaps that we found during discovery and then determine the solutions that will help you meet your goals. Phase 3 is delivery of an executive summary with recommendations to fill capability gaps, application of best practices to your specific situation, and advice on your remote work policy. The workshop takes about 4 weeks, and really one of its major benefits is it provides a structured, methodical process for leadership teams to have conversations about their future workforce strategy and build consensus about the path forward. And when you've built consensus, that enables clear communication, consistent communication to employees. And now you have the freedom to move forward in confidence that you're going to build your workplace design and the real estate strategy on solid rock, not shifting sand. The 5th step of the roadmap is implementation of the plan. And for this, Cresa offers a more robust blueprint plan, which includes everything from the workshop, but a deeper dive into discovery and analysis, and follow-on monitoring and feedback over a 60, 90, and 120-day period. So with that, let me offer a summary. The desire for freedom is changing where and when we work. As important as a shared central office is, and it absolutely is, this desire for freedom of choice demands that most organizations develop a hybrid workforce strategy. And to get there, transition is key. We're currently enduring the COVID-19 experience, but just over the horizon is unimpeded access to your shared office. And how you transition to that new hybrid workforce environment will determine how sustainable and competitive you will be. And then finally, be sequential to be successful. Remember, it only makes sense to develop your workspace design and real estate strategy after you've evaluated the human component of your workforce strategy and all of the critical requirements that make it successful. Give yourself meaningful information to inform your decision-making and build your strategies on solid rock, not shifting sand. Now, there's one last thought that we want to leave you with. I was in the Navy for 8 years flying jets off of aircraft carriers. So I know that the Navy is an organization that runs on planning, training, and leadership, especially leadership. Similarly, implementing corporate programs, especially those that involve significant change, requires the same 3 elements. This is a time of dramatic change, and that change requires leadership to find the right hybrid workforce strategy that supports your people and makes you competitive. And for a good example of this, I'm going to return back to the very beginning of the webinar to Jamie Dimon, Chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase. In his annual letter to shareholders, Jamie presents a very rational and wise approach. When speaking about where his employees will work in the future, he says, in all cases, these decisions about where employees work depend upon what is optimal for our company and our clients, and we will extensively monitor and analyze outcomes to ensure this is the case. To that, I say yes. That is the approach that we recommend and the philosophy we live by at Cresa. The key is for you to make decisions that are optimal for your company and your clients, whatever those decisions may be. And when you make your decision and implement it, don't let it go on autopilot. Continue to monitor and analyze. And these are the same goals that we have at Cresa, whether advising on office and warehouse leasing or workplace design or specifically workforce strategies. Our aim is to provide information and a process that helps you build consensus among leaders and make good decisions about what's optimal for your company. And we make recommendations on how to implement those decisions and how to support your employees and managers. But ultimately, it takes your leadership to initiate the planning, make decisions, implement the plan, and monitor outcomes. And we're here to help support you all the way through. So thank you for listening. We appreciate your time that you've spent here. We're moving to the phase where we're going to answer some questions. It looks like we may have had a couple questions come in here left. Okay, good. So, and we've got 8 minutes. So, first question, it's always tight, but first question that we got is about the allowances that that are offered, and is how much, and do you recommend an allowance or a stipend or a reimbursement? And Steve, I didn't know if you had ideas on that or not.
I do.
Got a couple. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and let's break out these into kind of two areas. The first would be, what are your upfront costs to begin working at home? And those would be the things that you typically wouldn't have outside of your docking station and your laptop. So providing an allowance for monitors or a stand-up desk or an ergonomic chair. Right, earlier you mentioned of kind of having an employee buying program, working with a select group of providers and having a list of tools they could procure, and then setting a budget for that. And
Right.
if you do it through that preferred provider, then the company is reimbursing the store for that rather than the employee. So best way to handle those up front is to have a buying program through your company portal or through a Staples or Office Max or Office Depot to go in and get those, but provide a pre-selected list of chairs and desks and the others. Employees are also going to have to work around things like lighting and those things, but that would be more employee provided. So the first would be how much for the upfront cost, and typically those would be in between $250 and $500 to equip a virtual office with monitors and an ergonomic chair at minimum. The second is looking at the second, which is the longer term. What are your monthly recurring costs that would be associated to equip a home office? And that would be dealing with your internet access and reimbursement. We want to make sure that our employees have good, high quality internet access, and potentially using a cell phone hotspot or a cell phone as a backup, because the worst thing that can happen is all of a sudden Comcast or AT&T or whomever your local service provider is has an interruption or an outage. And in those environments, providing a stipend or a monthly reimbursement for those. And I'm going to put an asterisk, as everyone does, when you're talking about stipends or reimbursements. That's something you want to review with your tax and financial teams, where your CFO would work with your CPA to say what is best. But let's answer the questions again. How much? About $250 to $500 for the upfront, and use a buying program through a vendor, if possible. And then the second is that monthly reimbursement, and that's typically up to about $100 for reimbursement to cover your cell phone with a hotspot on your cell phone and your internet access.
Yeah, I find it interesting that it is true some states, California in particular, require a company. One of the reasons we know this is that we have a client who is considering going 100% remote for most of its company, and they have employees in California, and California requires that companies fund whatever are reasonable and necessary costs to carry out your work, and that means at home your whatever it takes for you to, your phone, voice communications, internet service, etc. So there's some, and then there's tax implications with all those for both the employee and for the company. So that is an area that you want to make sure you're consulting your finance team and your human resources team, because it could bite you if you're not prepared for that when you're doing your planning. And that's one part of the reason why we think this methodical process of evaluating these critical requirements is so important for decision making. Another question that came in was, well, how do you deal with different profiles of some employees part-time, some employees in the office all the time, but maybe only 4 days a week, et cetera. And my thought there is this once again comes down to leadership and thoughtful planning and consensus building. Every company is going to be different. Every company has to evaluate what is optimal. It's like what Jamie Dimon said, what is optimal for you? And I think a process of gathering leaders together and getting feedback from department level and even team level employees is really important in making that decision. But the thing that I will end on, and then Steve, I'd like to hear your comments, is whatever behavior you want to see from your team or your company needs to be demonstrated at the higher level. And that's what leadership is about. Employees will mimic the behavior of their leaders. If they see a leader going in every day and you're pursuing a hybrid strategy where you're maybe not getting enough space for everyone to be in the office every day, they're going to follow you because they're going to feel compelled that that's the culture of our company. So your thoughts on that, Steve?
Right, no, and that's right. When you have an us versus them mentality, and that can fester if gone unrecognized, address it early, address it often, and it is a top-down approach. But think about this. We tend to think of communication coming from a top-down, but communication is really a two-way exercise. And getting that upward feedback, I'd recommend two areas. First is develop an employee council and put in place getting feedback from members across the organization, no matter what their job function is, get cross-function and get different levels of management so that on a regular basis, HR and operations can meet with those individuals and gather their feedback. And that's both in person and via survey so that you're getting upward feedback. But as well, have your managers meet regularly to talk about what's working, what's not working, what feedback are we getting, what have you tried that provided improvement, and then documenting that and communicating that back up to leadership as well so that we're making decisions based on feedback. But where Jamie Dimon mentioned in his quote of having that which we can monitor and analyze those areas around performance and managing outcomes. There are so many different ways to measure and manage data and indications. Compile that and build that into a report and a dashboard based on your managerial role so that you're getting real-time empirical data.
And that's what performance management, that whole school of thought is about. So, and there's a lot of tools for that, and there's both consulting advisory services as well as software. So, but we are out of time. So thank you to everyone for joining. You will receive a follow-up email with information, or excuse me, with this recording. And again, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And we hope to have conversations with you all at some point down the road.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.